Chag Sameach. Bob Hope once famously told a story about when he and his wife went looking for plots at the cemetery. And his wife turns to him and says, "Bob, would you like a beautiful plot overlooking the water? Or would you like a plot underneath that cedar tree?" Bob Hope turned to his wife and said, "Surprise me." Indeed, I wonder what our ancestors looking down upon us today, this week, would think of us. Surely in most of our lives they would look at with great surprise. Would it be pleasant surprise? Or would it be disappointment surprise? There's a custom in the week or two leading up to Passover, as well as Sukkot and Shavuot in just a few weeks' time from now. There's a custom before these holidays of actually going to the cemetery to visit the graves of our loved ones. And in those moments, we ask God to grant mercy on their soul, that they should rest forever in peace. There's also a custom of seeking advice, beseeching their interference, if you will, in our lives. When we go to the graves, I wonder if our ancestors look down upon us with pleasant surprise or with disappointment. Our parents, our grandparents, siblings, sadly even sometimes children, our spouses. What do they think of when they look down upon our lives? And of course, almost a week ago now at Seder, that's really when I notice empty chairs. That's when we feel those who are missing the most. At Seder time, we remember parents and grandparents. We remember spouses, siblings, children. The role that they played in our lives, especially at Passover time, especially at Seder. And we notice the empty chairs. We feel their missing presence. And as I do every year at Seder time, I look around our room. And I note that my youngest son, Eyal, who's named after my grandfather, my grandpa Starr, blessed memory, is he listening to my youngest read the 4 questions? And is he looking down with pleasant surprise and sheping nachas at the way we're following the traditions just as he did? And I look at my older son, I look at Caleb, who was born 30 days after the death of my mother-in-law, a blessed memory. Her Hebrew name was Kayla, which is how we got Caleb. She died 10 years and 1 day ago. And as he's quite literally leading all of the Hebrew at our Seder, I wonder, is she looking upon us with pleasant surprise? Is she sheping nachas at what her family is continuing to do? And I think where I stand now as a rabbi at Shaarey Zedek. And I remember my grandmother, Gruka, a blessed memory, who died just as I was starting rabbinical school. Would she look down upon me now with pride and seeing me as a rabbi of a synagogue? Each of us at Passover time, especially in the weeks leading up to Seder and then at Seder night itself, we're called upon to think of our relatives, our family of blessed memory, and to ask the question about what are they surprised? And is it pleasant surprise or is it disappointment? Of course, at Pesach time, we think of our ancestors some 3,300 years ago who stood at the precipice between slavery and freedom and were granted an open door to begin a journey toward the Promised Land. And I'll invite you to turn with me, if you will, in your Chumashim. I'm on page 400 in your Eitz Chaim Chumashim, Exodus chapter 13. And here we are at the moment just as freedom is about to begin. The Israelites are running around collecting up wealth from the Egyptians. Now, the Midrash is clear to say that they weren't stealing it, God forbid. The Egyptians were giving it over freely, as reparations almost, out of guilt for what they had put our ancestors through. And we come upon this interesting verse. Here I am again on page 400. It says, "So God led the people round about by way of the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds." The Torah continues. "V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim." Translated, now the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt. But many of you know your Hebrew. Chamushim, it sounds like the word chamesh or chumash. What does the word chamesh mean? 5. Some of our rabbis read this to say that only 1/5 of our ancestors actually came out of slavery. Only 20% of our ancestors left Egypt to begin the journey toward the Promised Land. Our rabbis come to teach only 20% of our ancestors had the hope and the faith to be redeemed. The other 80% remained in darkness in Egypt. Only 20% went out. Then the Torah continues, "Vayikach Moshe et atzamot Yosef imo." And Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had exacted an oath from the children of Israel, saying, "God will be sure to take notice of you. Then you shall carry up my bones from here with you." In the book of Genesis, in the book of Genesis, Joseph says to his children and his grandchildren, "When you leave Egypt one day, take my bones with you and bury me in the Promised Land." And sure enough, some 400 years later, as our ancestors were preparing to leave Egypt, getting ready to leave everything they've known for centuries, Moses takes the time to go find Joseph's tomb and to gather the aron, the casket with Joseph, and to bring that with them on their journey out of Mitzrayim. And Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, the Torah said, fulfilling the oath made by the children and grandchildren of Joseph to do just that. Now, interestingly enough, our rabbis say, no, you're reading it wrong. Don't just read Vayikach Moshe et atzamot Yosef. Don't just read that Moses took the bones of Joseph. Read instead Vayikach Moshe et atmut Yosef. Moses took the very essence of Joseph. See, the words in Hebrew for bones and essence are very similar. They're just differentiated by a small vowel. So the rabbis read, don't worry about taking the bones of Joseph. Take the essence. And of course, in our tradition, Joseph was known for being a tzaddik, our truly righteous person, a man of deep faith who attributed all his success to God. Joseph was known also as a man of great restraint for how he held back with the coming on of Potiphar's wife. And Joseph was known as a man of forgiveness and how he forgave his brothers for what they did to him. So the rabbis read, don't read that Moses took Joseph's bones with him. Read that Moses took Joseph's essence with him. Those truly righteous characteristics. That's what Moses went looking for as he was about to lead the people on a 40-year journey toward the Promised Land. There's now a debate among the rabbis. Was it the bones themselves that Moses brought out? Was it the form, the structure, the actual casket of Joseph that they carried with them along with the 10 Commandments on the 40-year journey toward the Promised Land? Or was it simply the essence that he brought with him? The atzamut, the essence. At this Passover holiday, we recall our family, we recall our relatives of blessed memory, and we recall our ancestors. And especially on Seder night, but throughout the 8 days of Passover, we are called upon to bring both the form and the essence with us. And I look around at our people, and I wonder, Are we doing that? Are we bringing the form of Judaism? Are enough of our children and our grandchildren observing this holiday of Passover the way our parents would be proud of, the way their grandparents would be proud of? Are our children and our grandchildren carrying on the essence of what our loved ones stood for? Are they the menschs? Are they the tzaddikim, the righteous ones? Do they carry on those characteristics that our parents, our spouses, our siblings, our children wanted them to be? And at this Passover holiday, we're called upon as we visit the graves of our loved ones and as we sit at Seder night and throughout the 8 days of Pesach to ask that question, are we doing well enough? Are we following both the form and the essence of what our parents and our grandparents wanted us to be? Are they looking down upon us with pleasant surprise or with great disappointment? That's the question we're asked today as Passover begins to come to a close. Way there. This is our time to perform cheshbon hanefesh, a searching of the soul, just like we did a week ago with the chametz, and just like we did 6 months ago at Rosh Hashanah, to search ourselves, our families. Are we doing as good of a job as we should be in the form of Judaism? And are we doing as good of a job as we should be in carrying on the essence of those we love who are very much with us in spirit, but who are not physically present at the Seder table? This Pesach, this last day as we stand on the precipice between slavery and freedom once again, we have a choice. We can either remain the 80% who are in the dark and stay in Egypt, or we can be the 20% who, because of our hope and our faith and our sense of obligation to encourage and inspire our children and our grandchildren to share in our hope and our faith, are we part of that 20% who are going to begin the march toward the Promised Land? This last day of Pesach, I ask you to join me in looking at our lives and asking you to deepen our commitment to Jewish ritual, to the form of Judaism. I ask you to reach out to your children and your grandchildren and encourage them, help them strengthen their form, their commitment to Jewish ritual. But also on this last day of Passover, I ask you to bring with you and to help your children and grandchildren bring with them the essence of those we love who are with us now only in spirit. Because as we read in the Chumash, we are commanded to bring both the bones of Joseph with us, but his essence as well. This last day of Pesach, may God strengthen each one of us that we may share together on the journey of deepening Jewish ritual, the journey of deepening righteousness of the soul, the journey together toward the Promised Land. Chag Sameach.